This week we're going to be talking about how to take our city boards from looking like this to looking like this. And it's only going to take us just a couple of easy steps. Let's jump into it. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin. This, of course, is the Storycraft Society, and this week we are going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite topics when it comes to terrain building, and that is what comes after you build. We build all of these super awesome buildings and bits of stuff, right? And we get to take those and set those out onto boards and scenes to show our friends, whether we are wargaming on them or playing tabletop role-playing games. And that, I think, is the most fun and exciting part of all of the building. It's the whole point, right? This week, we're going to be focusing just on city boards, but I think that this is going to become a series where I talk about how to set lots of different scenes up. I'm starting with cities because I think this is one of the coolest ways that you can go from kind of zero to hero with just some really simple tips. And also, I think when I look out over people's setups and boards that they have out, whether it be for role-playing games or wargaming, I think city boards are the ones that could be taken up that next level a little bit more commonly than wilderness scenes and that sort of thing. So with that said, let's just immediately dive into it. I'm so excited to talk about this stuff, so let's get to it. So number one is actually a really simple one, and it might feel like a no-brainer to a lot of people, but I think it really deserves to be said because it is the starting place for all the boards that we create. I see a lot of people who will set up city boards online that what they'll end up doing is using a grass mat and then setting their buildings on top of that. Now, if that's all you have, a little bit of terrain with a grass mat is infinitely better than no terrain, of course, in my opinion. But if you can get something else, it really does an immediate, snap, way better effect if you have roads. So don't use a grass mat like this. Instead, try using something like this that has cobblestone streets printed on it, something like that. Having these streets goes such a long way to making it visually appear as an interesting and lived-in city that just the plain grass mat won't do. But then also you can take that up the next step and go from here up to the city board, which is going to add even more texture and visual interest. Now, I will say that this board to me feels like a city board. You have more of the cobblestone sidewalks, you have more of the big public plazas. This one feels a little bit more villagey, so that's maybe even another step that you can go. Are you trying to make this look like it's part of a big city? Or are you trying to make this look like it is part of a smaller town or village? Like I said, number one, mat choice is really important. Get something with roads on it that will help so much. Now, the board that I chose to go with is my city board. Now, that is the choice that is right for me. Obviously, you have to go with what is right for the story that you want your scenery to tell. Maybe the cobblestone village mat would be better for you. Maybe going with something that's a little bit more rural feeling would be right for you. For me, for this example, I'm going to be using my city board because I want to set the scene of a city block in a large city. The next step that you need to take is obviously to move on to the buildings, because having buildings on your board is really, obviously, is going to sell that this is going to end up being a city, right? But it's not just that simple. How you lay your buildings out will also send kind of a subconscious message to whoever is looking at your piece. So let's dive into a couple of examples. So I pulled a few buildings off of my shelf, and the very first thing that I'm going to talk about is a luxury that I have that not everyone will have, and that is building choice. So if you choose buildings that are more like this or like this, you're going to send more of a townhouse city vibe, whereas if you pick more of a building like this or little farmhouse buildings like this, wow, let's get those so that you can actually see, or farmhouse buildings like these, they're going to send a different message. If you have the luxury, think about what types of buildings you are placing out. Let's just go with the buildings that we have here, at least for right now. So if you are trying to set up a scene that, let's say, wants to feel more like a small town that is slowly being built up, put a little bit more space between your buildings and keep that spacing a little irregular. I think one of the biggest mistakes that you can make, and this is just so easily solved, people end up spacing everything out to perfect increments. That this is 4 inches from this is 4 inches from this is 4 inches. I think that that's not the way you want to think about it. What you want to think about is, if this person built their house first, how would they feel about this neighbor being here? So maybe this person built a little bit further away because they didn't want to make this person upset. And then these are two, stylistically similar buildings. So maybe they got built at the same time and were built a little closer together. And then this building over in this area, now you've got a little bit more space, and it implies a smaller town that is slowly starting to grow up. Now I've grabbed a couple of extra buildings. What if we want to make this feel like more of a large city? You need alleyways, you need tightly put together buildings, and you need to set a crowded vibe on your board. And for me, that's what I'm going to be going for on this particular city board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a bigger building. Specifically, I'm going to start with this church. The church was probably built first. So I'm going to put that here. Then as people would come to this area and they liked the area, they wanted to live here, it started to build up. So then from there, what I need to do is start putting my buildings together. And what's really important here is make them touch. You want this townhouse, row house kind of a feel. I'm going to take this building here and tuck it back in like this. So maybe let's do this. Let's take this one and move it over here. Move these, pull this up here. And then now see, that's starting to push me off here. So I can actually get a little creative here. Maybe it was built a little bit further over here like that, which is totally okay. Feel free to move your stuff around and find the fit that matches your scene and your story the best. And then actually we can take and maybe even tuck this church building back like this and still get that same feel that we had just there, leaving a little bit of an alleyway here. And then now we're gonna do that same thing over on this side. We're gonna get that push and pull of buildings. And now I think we're starting to get that feel that I was looking for of this larger city. We've got some alleyways that exist, as well as our big plaza out here in the center. All right, so the next thing that we need to talk about now that we got all of our buildings put up is maybe my favorite tip in this whole video. Remember your contrast. So what I mean by that is, and you can actually take this to any board that you build, any scene that you set up. If you're building a city board, don't forget to add some nature. If you're building a nature board like a wilderness board, don't forget to add some ruins or something like that to it that pushes and pulls at the eye. So for example, in this board, I need to add some foliage to it to get it so that it feels like it is a little bit more alive and it moves your eyes around it just a little bit more. So in order to add something of green, some nature to this board, I'm going to pick out an area. I think I'm gonna make it like a plaza, like right here in the center. And what I'm gonna do is start laying out some trees. I wanna put them in some kind of a clump because remember, that's the way it works in cities. Everything is tight together. That's always really important. And then now we're going to surround that with a little wall to protect it from people who might run their carts into the trees or whatever. All right, so our last step for this video, I think, is going to be the most important. Might not be my favorite, but it is the most important, which is going to be the rule of stuff. The last 10% of putting together a board like this is going to be where all of the excitement and the eyes and the interest comes from. That's going to be putting out little boxes and crates and barrels and wood that needs to be chopped by the people who live in these buildings, right? That's the most important part to making a scene super come to life, is all of those little tiny details. Setting a bucket by the well, setting out the little merchant tent, all of those things are going to be what really make it come to life and go up that next level. So with that said, hopefully you really enjoyed watching this video. I really enjoyed making it because to me, setting up the scene is the best part out of making all of this stuff. And just as a quick recap, here is what we learned. We learned that we need to pick a good mat that will fit whatever story we are trying to tell with our scenery. We have to set out our buildings in a way that works with that. Do we want more space to look like a village or a small town? Do we want it to be jam-packed together and tight so it looks like a big city? The next thing is don't forget nature. Nature exists even in the biggest of cities, and having that push and pull visual interest of some trees or foliage inside of all of the buildings and man-made structures is super important. And lastly, and definitely most importantly, don't forget to add all of the stuff, all the little bits of stuff that make your board come to life. So, with that said, definitely like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't. It's free, it costs you absolutely nothing, and I promise you will like the content that will be coming out on the channel. Show this video to a friend that you think would enjoy it, because that is the best way to help a small YouTube channel out. And that's it. That's what I got. So, thank you so much for watching, and until next week, I'll be seeing you. So that it looks like a big, whoop,